So for this whole week's worth of recordings, I'm really going to talk about how your childhood experiences, such as bonding and attachment and parenting styles and the role of family function, as well as poverty, how they all impact adult health, therefore, again, being a social determinant of health. And the last slide in this group of slides, this particular lecture on bonding attachment will focus on how that impacts other health outcomes. So what is attachment? Attachment is that strong affectional tie, and this is it binds a person to an intimate companion, but it also helps bind infants to their initial caregivers. One of the most important moments right after childbirth is actually what happens with the baby after a child is born. There's something called kangaroo care, where a baby is immediately put on a new mother, and that is healthy both for the mother. It helps boost her production of oxytocin, which helps reduce her amount of bleeding after childbirth, as well as oxytocin is that cuddle chemical, which really helps a newborn infant bond with its mother. It's also a behavioral system through which humans learn how to regulate emotional distress. And so within humans, really between birth up to age 6 months is when you start really developing your sense of attachment for whomever your caregiver is. There have been interesting studies to question why do infants bond with their parents. And Harry Harlow conducted studies with monkeys, and he was really interested in understanding why monkeys bonded and developed socially the way that they do. And he also wanted to relay this back to infant development. And his questions were really about which would the monkey prefer? Would a monkey prefer a caregiver that gave him food alone or comfort? And so this was also kind of relaying back to human bonding and attachment to ask, are infants, are they really only bonded and attached to caregivers because they feed them and because they give them their physiological needs? Or are there other things such as comfort that draw infants to their caregivers? So in this experiment, Harry Harlow basically gave one model monkey, gave it milk in a bottle, and that was the wire monkey, which gave the baby monkey sustenance, right? And the other monkey was the terry cloth monkey. It was basically the monkey. It was basically the mothering, non-animate non-living creature that gave the baby comfort. And what Harry Harlow found was that the monkey spent on average of its waking hours, a vast majority of its time clinging to the terry cloth monkey, and it would only leave for a short amount of time to feed on the wire monkey that actually had the food. And so what Harry Harlow was able to deduce from this was that, yeah, baby monkeys will prefer the comfort and will prefer the caregiving of something that's warm and nurturing, as opposed to will feed the infant monkey alone. So within monkeys, Harry Harlow found that it's really the first 90 days in which these monkeys establish emotional connection or bonding and attachment, whereas within humans, we tend to form that attachment within the first 6 months of life. There was an additional study that Dr. Harlow conducted in which he looked to see between monkeys that received the terry cloth monkey and among those that received no comforting mother-like monkey, how these monkeys socially progressed. And those that had the terry cloth monkey mentally and physically were developed in a healthier manner than those and responded better to stress and stressors as adult monkeys as compared to those that didn't have that nurturing and that attachment and bonding as a young monkey. Next up, we've got John Bowlby. John Bowlby has a theory of attachment in which Dr. Bowlby said, you know what, I really think there's something about the attentiveness of a caregiver that drives that attachment. And that if a child, if an infant, if a toddler feels as though that he or she is getting enough attention and response, and if a caregiver is nearby, they're going to feel loved and secured, and they're going to have a secure attachment or secure bond as they grow older. And that will be predictive of the types of relationships that that person pursues as an adult. But if not, then the child might become clingy and anxious and have higher rates of separation anxiety, or they might have this type of anxious attachment where they're trying to make sure that the parent's still there, that they have a hard time feeling as though they are capable of being loved, and there's this fear of rejection that'll be developed if this person um, doesn't isn't capable of feeling that secure attachment. And last but not least, a child might also become avoidant and decide, you know what, it's just easier for me not to try to pursue relationships in the case that I can't get the security that I need. It might become overly self-reliant. Mary Ainsworth continued on with this same theory and really developed something called the strange situation. The Strange Situation was a series of 8 different episodes, which each lasted about, or 8 different experiments, which each lasted about 3 minutes at a time. For the first episode, a mother and a baby and an experimenter were in the room together, and the experimenter and the researchers were watching this, trying to see what kind of attachment the baby had with the mother. In the second situation, the mother and the baby were alone. In the third, a stranger joins the mother and the infant. And really, with this stranger in the same room, the research team wanted to see, how did the baby respond? Was the baby anxious? Did it feel safe because the mother was nearby? Did it still explore the room? The stranger left, or the mother left, I'm sorry. And then in situation 4, the baby and the stranger were alone. So researchers want to know what happens when that mother's gone, when that sense of safety, if there's that secure relationship, what happened when that mother left and the stranger and the baby were alone? Was the baby scared? Was it anxious? Was it fine? Did not really care? Did not really notice anyone was around? In the next step, the mother returns and the stranger leaves. So again, the mother and the baby are still together. In the sixth scenario, the mother leaves and the infant is left alone completely. In the seventh scenario, the stranger returns and the baby's alone with the stranger. And in the eighth, the mother returns and the stranger leaves. So again, these are each 3-minute scenarios where different adults are in and out of the room. And at one point in time, the infant is left completely alone. I'm sorry, the toddler. These were children between the ages of 1 and 2. And so when a baby had a secure attachment to the mother, which happened 60 to 65% of the time, whenever the mother or the caregiver was in the room, they felt free to explore the room. They had a separation anxiety when the mother left the room, but they were really excited when the mother returned, and they really wanted to have that comfort when she returned. And might have still experienced some kind of stress when a stranger entered the room, but again, still felt a little bit more safe because the mother was in the room. Now, in 15% of the cases, when there was an avoidant relationship, then the baby tended to ignore the caregiver when present. When the caregiver left, when the mother left, he or she showed little distress on separation, but actively turned away from the caregiver when the caregiver returned. So almost as though it was kind of I don't need you in order to feel safe in this room. And that baby almost developed its own sense of self-reliance because of lacking that secure type of attachment. A resistant attachment, there was little exploration when the mother or the caregiver was in the room, but it was almost this type of anxious attachment, where the baby almost seemed a little bit too anxiously attached to the parent, a little too angry with the parent, resisted physical contact upon return from the caregiver. And in disoriented, there was confusion in these different settings, that the baby experienced distress upon separation, but was really confused when the caregiver re-entered the room. And So you can find that you'd have more of a resistant type of attachment if you have a severely depressed caregiver. So if a mother has postpartum depression, you'd find that that increases the likelihood of a child developing a more resistant form of attachment. And if you have a severely depressed caregiver or caregiver living with an addiction, you'd find more often this disorganized, disoriented. The healthy form of attachment is the secure attachment, which again is experienced by 60 to 65% of US adults. And the rest are seen as insecure and have more negative outcomes associated with those types of attachment styles. So how does that affect health and health outcomes? There have been different research studies which have looked to see what happens when people have healthy attachment styles, when they have that more secure. So most of this actually comes from the Pietromonaco close relationship process and health article that you see at the very bottom. And there's really only one that talks about insecure attachment. That's this information that's coming from that Anderson article. But generally what you find is that with a more secure attachment, people have a better time regulating their emotions and their behavior. And that tends to mediate their experience of stress and pain, and they've got a healthier response to different stressors in their lives. But those who have insecure attachments tend to have less healthy responses to stress. And that's often also associated with a higher risk of a poor self-image, of having a poor diet, of decreased exercise, and also going outside of oneself um, to try to mitigate stress, right? And to try to calm oneself down, whether that would be through eating comfort foods or through drinking alcohol or through drug use, right? So insecure attachments, those less healthy outcomes, children who have insecure attachments are 1.3 times more likely to be obese. Anxious attachments and avoidance are also more likely to have higher rates of depression and anxiety as adults. So again, this one social determinant of health of how you were raised and your attachment style between the age of being born to 6 months can influence your attachment styles as a child and later on as an adult, and that can influence these downstream behaviors of exercise, of physical activity, of nutrition, and of how you respond to stress. So that's all I have for this particular part of the lecture, and I will see you soon on the next set of slides.